Good afternoon. Welcome to the Adverse Childhood Experiences and Alcohol and Drug Misuse poster session of the inaugural Injury Prevention Center Research Symposium. I am Dr. Sarah Stoddard, and I'll be moderating this session. Thanks so much for joining us. We're so glad that you are here today with us. As a reminder, the session is being recorded. Only the presenters and moderators are visible. Chat is disabled, so please use the Q&A function for all questions. If you have a question for our presenters, please ask it by typing in the Q&A feature in the bottom menu bar at any time. And please indicate who your question is for by including their name at the beginning of your question. Q&A will take place after all of the abstracts have been presented. But we encourage you to send questions at any time throughout the session so we can have a chance to review them. And we will allow presenters to provide answers as time allows at the end. Our presenters will have 4 minutes to present their poster, and we will share their poster slide while they are presenting. But you may also access their posters and abstracts at the injury kind of website for the symposium, which is injury.umich.edu/research-symposium/2020 for easier viewing. There are 5 other poster sessions occurring at the same time. And as much as possible, we'd love it for you to stay in this session and listen to these great presentations. However, you're also free to jump around between the sessions. Recordings of all sessions will be released in the upcoming weeks. Now join me in welcoming our poster presenters. We will introduce everyone now so to not interrupt the flow of the presentations. So I'd like to please welcome first David Greco, Annie Murphy, and Tanya Gergel from the University of Michigan Medical School, Miriam Swadane from the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Michigan, Dr. Jenny Jesser from the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Michigan School of Medicine, Dr. Laura Schwab-Reese from the Department of Public Health at Purdue University, Nora Elrube, sorry, I'm not the best presenter or pronouncer always, so I hope I didn't do that too badly, from the School of Public Health at Kent State University, and Dr. Fang Hong Dong from the School of Nursing at the University of Pennsylvania. Okay. We're going to begin. Thank you, everyone, for the presentations in advance.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for viewing our poster, ACEs Prevention in Adolescents, Maintaining the Efficacy of Longitudinal Community-Based Educational Programs. We want to quickly thank the IPC, our colleagues who contributed to this poster, and Dr. Michael Lucella for his assistance with programming and research. As a brief intro, Annie, Tanya, and I are fourth-year medical students at the University of Michigan. We started this project as part of a student organization in order to work with community of need in order to create long-term impact. And Annie will start us off with a background of our research.
Yeah, hey there. So I'm sure many of you are aware how adverse childhood experiences can really impact the health outcomes of people later in life. Detroit in particular, 40% of children face 2 or more of these adverse childhood experiences by the age of 18, which is significantly higher than the rest of the state. The CDC has recommended a number of different kinds of interventions, including individual-based, such as teaching skills and connecting youth to supportive programming and caring adults. So many of us came into this project with experiences in youth education, and be it in Detroit or other cities. And we kind of had an understanding of the disparity in health knowledge in youth. And so we really wanted to partner with a program in Detroit to kind of bring some of that health education and form a longitudinal experience for these kids. So we ended up partnering with a Detroit-based organization, the Detroit Food Academy, to provide a day-long educational program to prevent ACEs and ultimately teach them about student-driven health topics. Then following year, we transitioned it to a new team. So in terms of our methods, we had 22 students each year for a total of 44 students who were involved in the program. Prior to the session, we had a pre-test over the 6 topics that we discussed, and then administered a post-test after the session. We also had the students complete a satisfaction scale from 1 to 10. And so in the 2018 program, our group, we created this partnership with a program in Detroit. We developed the curriculum ourselves based on student interest and need. And then we conducted the program and analyzed the participant data. Afterwards, we transitioned to the new team. We gave them curriculum and they modified it to how they wanted to present the data, which they did the next year for those students with some modifications, but the same test, and then conducted and analyzed the data as well. So we use a paired t-test for results within years, and then a non-parametric test for between years, and then use a significance of 0.05.
For our results, we were surprised by the stark contrast between years in terms of pre versus post-test results in terms of attainment of knowledge by the students. We were able to demonstrate through our data analysis that the pre-test score was not significantly different between the 2 years. We had the same number in our cohort, 22 each, with individual and unique students in each cohort, but the post-test score was unique and significant statistically between the 2 groups. There was a approximately 19% increase in knowledge attainment in the 2018 group and a non-significant decrease for the 2019 group. There was no difference in the satisfaction rate between the 2 groups. It was approximately 9 for each. And when we went down by category, the different topics that we were trying to go over for prevention, the only one that did not show growth was the safe sex education for 2018, and there was no growth shown in 2019.
So reiterating what David said, when we went back to review the factors that may have been in play in order to yield the different results in the 2018 and the 2019 cohort, we realized that the 2 most prominent factors were the difference in educator enthusiasm. So in the first year that we rolled out this program in 2018, the instructors created our content from scratch. We used experts to review our curriculum as well. And so there was increased enthusiasm in teaching that curriculum, whereas in 2019, the leadership at that time reused the curriculum with very slight modifications. And so reusing prior content prevented the same level of educator enthusiasm from coming across and engaging the participants. And then finally, in 2018, we also made sure to select participant leads. So we had participants lead some of the content themselves as well. And we made sure to visit the Detroit Food Academy multiple times prior to the program in order to build rapport and relationship with the participants, which didn't happen in 2019. So for conclusions and significance moving forward, we highly recommend that anyone else trying to implement a similar program keep these factors in mind in order to create longitudinal, sustainable, and beneficial impact in their community. And we hope to be able to go back and implement some of these factors more conscientiously in the future as well. And we also determined that the efficacy of the projects over time depend on a successful transition between the leadership programs, as well as engagement and investment from the participants themselves. Thank you.
We'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miriam, and I'm excited to be here today to present my poster on adolescent and emerging adults with acceptability of a social media intervention to reduce risky alcohol use. So, examining injury-related consequences associated with risky drinking amongst adolescents and emerging adults can have a significant public health benefit. As such, we delivered an 8-week alcohol intervention on Facebook secret groups by trained health coaches. This poster presents our participants' injury-related baseline characteristics and their acceptability of data obtained 3 months post-intervention. The recruited participants would pass 3-month risky drinking through social media ads. 955 participants were recruited through 10 waves of interventions. Through each wave, participants were randomized into 3 conditions. 1, SMI, social media intervention. 2, SMI&I, social media intervention plus incentive. And 3, a control condition. As can be seen looking at our participant characteristics, half of our participants were females, mostly white, with some diversity including sexual orientation. On the Facebook groups, e-coaches posted MI adherent content, including articles, videos, quizzes, polls about stress, so content related to positive coping, alcohol and drug use motives, and injury prevention pieces of content. So content, eliciting productive behavioral strategies. 3 months post-intervention, we had participants rate their content enjoyment and e-coach acceptability through Qualtrics surveys. And looking at the risky behavior characteristics reported at baseline, we saw that about 52% of our participants reported drinking and driving, 27% reported driving under the influence of cannabis, 49% reported physical fights while drinking alcohol, and 63% reported overdose, non-fatal overdose. We have 2 examples below of content posted by e-coaches on the group. Participant comments are above with e-coach responses below. The first post is asking participants what they might do if one of their friends got alcohol poisoning. The second post asks participants their thought on designated drivers for marijuana use. In both of these cases, our posts are eliciting protective behavioral strategies of our participants. When the participants respond with their protective behavioral strategies, the e-coaches in these examples respond with positive reflections. In looking at participant content enjoyment ratings, we found that more participants in the intervention groups versus control groups reported positive enjoyment on the content posted in the Facebook groups. Additionally, there was a significant difference for meme and alcohol ratings between the SMI&I group in the middle and the SMI&I condition on the left. And looking at peer interaction ratings, more intervention participants also found peer interaction more helpful than the control participants. And lastly, in looking at participant e-coach acceptability ratings, we found that more participants in the intervention groups versus control reported positive e-coach ratings on helpfulness, warmth, respect, and understanding. Additionally, e-coach helpfulness, understanding, and peer interaction ratings had a significantly greater proportion in the SMI&I condition than the SMI. In sum, our data suggests that adolescents and emerging adults were receptive to the 8-week interventions delivered on secret Facebook groups. Additionally, high receptivity ratings demonstrates that social media is a potential avenue for future alcohol and injury prevention interventions. Lastly, future analyses will examine intervention efficacy on alcohol and injury-related outcomes. Thank you very much.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Jenny Jester. I'm in the Department of Psychiatry here at Michigan Medicine, and I'm in the Zero to Thrive section. We concentrate on high-risk families with very young children and helping to increase the positive development in those families. So I'm going to be talking about the infant mental health home visiting treatment and an evaluation that we've done of it. Infant mental health home visiting in Michigan is a Medicaid-funded intervention that's available throughout the state of Michigan. And it's been implemented throughout the state, but the evaluation of it has needs some more evidence base. So along with the Mission Collaborative for Infant Mental Health Research, we've collected data over a period of a year to evaluate the effects of the infant mental health home visiting treatment. And in this current study, we're concentrating on child abuse potential. So this is one of the adverse childhood experiences that we are trying to prevent with this intervention. We had data on 78 female caregivers over a year, and each of the caregivers has a child that we collected data on from age 0 to 36 months. And all of them, because it's Medicaid funded intervention, all of the families are very low income, and most also have other demographic risks. And each of them needs to have another risk to be eligible for the treatment. So infant mental health home visiting is a unique program in Michigan. And this little house here shows some of the pieces of the components of this infant mental health home visiting model. So one is that it's delivered by master's level clinicians that have extra training to get an endorsement in the model. And there's alliance building between the clinician and the participant is important. They also help the families get their material needs met. They can give developmental guidance and emotional support. And a particularly unique piece is infant parent psychotherapy, which is an attachment-based and strengths-based intervention to increase positive parenting and positive attachment relationships between the infant and their caregivers. So, and it's a pretty intense intervention that's about once a week for 1 to 1.5 hours. And as I think I mentioned, it can start as early as pregnancy and continue till the child's age 3. So it's an intensive intervention. And as I said, our study looked at all the families in our study were in treatment, and we measured them at baseline, 6 months, and 12 months. Well, I mean, just to clarify, they started in treatment and some of them left treatment. So we measured the brief child abuse potential inventory over these times. These are self-report factors that are related to child maltreatment. And it's been shown to be related to risk for future child abuse. So when we looked at child abuse over time, measured at these 3 time points, and we used the number of visits, the number of treatment visits as a measure of what the dose that they were getting of the treatment, we found in a linear mixed model that the number of home visits, the higher number of home visits predicted lower child abuse potential over this time. So the graph shows that I split the families up into 4 quartiles, so that the one on the left is the lowest quartile for number of visits. So they got the fewest visits, and then the one on the right got the most visits. And what we found is that you can see in the graph that those with the lowest visits had a little bit of an increase in the child abuse potential over time, whereas the ones in the higher group had a decrease in child abuse potential over time. So we have shown a bit of evidence here that the intervention is effective in decreasing child abuse potential over the period of time. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Laura Chalbrise. I'm at the Department of Public Health at Purdue University. And I want to start by asking you a question. So do the kids in your life have access to a cell phone? The chances are the answer to that question is yes, because about 2/3 of kids between the ages of 3 and 11, and about 95% of teens and tweens have access to a smartphone. So recognizing that most kids would strongly prefer to send a text rather than make a phone call, I worked with Crisis Text Line to identify if and then how young people discuss child maltreatment. For those of you not familiar with Crisis Text Line, they provide text-based crisis services 24/7, 365. In working with them, I learned that young people did in fact use this service to discuss child maltreatment, and that there was a really great need for young people to anonymously receive support from adults who were prepared to discuss maltreatment. And there was the rub. Crisis Text Line is a general service, which means that their counselors need to be prepared to respond to just about anything. And sometimes they weren't so great at discussing abuse, which I get. It's an emotionally sensitive, difficult topic to talk about sometimes. So at the same time I was wrestling with that data, the folks at Child Help were recognizing the same thing. Building on their 30 years of experience in providing call-based hotline services, they launched the text and chat arms of the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline in 2019. We're in the process now of refining their practice and training model, and we decided one way to start would be to understand the processes and the content of the conversations. So of the thousands that they get every month, we identified 314 conversations using stratified random sampling. We based that on the length of the contact and also whether the help seeker completed the after contact survey. Then we used conventional qualitative content analysis methods to analyze those conversations, which, if you're not familiar, basically means reading and rereading and then rereading again to identify patterns and themes within those conversations. Using those patterns and themes, we coded the conversations based on standardized categories and codes. For the next 2 minutes, I'll be giving you a little bit of a sneak peek into those results. So first, let's understand a little bit more about the people in our sample. About 25% were adults who were reaching out because they were concerned about a child in their life. About 13% were children seeking support or information for other children, and about 15% were children reaching out about their own experiences. Each of these conversations or types of conversations looked very different, so I'll discuss each of them separately. So first, often these conversations were quite brief with adults. It was usual for the adults to be seeking information. They needed to know the contact information for their local CPS office, or they wanted guidance on whether the concerns that they had about a child rose to the level of maltreatment. For the most part, these help seekers weren't in crisis, and they had information rather than emotional or other support needs. Then you have conversations where children were seeking support for other kids. In some ways, these conversations looked like the adult conversations. They often had information needs. They needed to know how to report a friend's experience. But more often than adults, they also had emotional or other support needs. They were usually pretty upset about what was happening to their friend, and they often, these conversations often had some pretty strong undertones of powerlessness. They really wanted to support their friends, but they recognized their limitations. So they both needed information and help processing. The largest group in our sample was kids who were seeking support for themselves. Most of the children in these situations rose to the level of maltreatment, although some were just distressed, which was still a problem. These conversations were quite distinct from the other two groups. These were the help seekers who were truly in crisis and had the greatest need for the counseling aspect of crisis counseling. The conversations were usually centered on how the children were coping with their experiences, and crisis counselors often used validation, unconditional positive regard, and praise to help affirm them. Usually these conversations lasted until children were no longer in emotional crisis. So that's a very quick overview of our results. We're very excited to see how they continue to shape the practice and training model in the next year, and I look forward to answering any questions you have. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. We all know how early child growth is very critical for a child's healthy development in terms of psychological and physical health. And we know that exposing a child to unhealthy environment puts them at risk of being engaged in unhealthy or risky behaviors or developing mental or psychological physical condition. And for my study, I want to look at more of a different perspective of the impact of adverse childhood experience, in which I want to evaluate the impact of a child being exposed to drugs at home in reporting difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making a decision. For my methods or my study in general, it is explanatory state level retrospective analysis of the 2019 PERFAS data from 15 US states that integrated the adverse childhood experience model to their questionnaire for adults aged 18 and older. From that cohort, I selected participants that answered the question if, did you live with anyone who used illegal street drugs or abused prescription drugs? And my outcome measure is a self-reported difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making a decision due to a physical, mental, or emotional condition. I used a weighted logistic model to measure the impact of the two groups and if it has any difference between them. From my sample is 106 to 220, in which 9.2% reported living with an adult that used drugs at home. As you can see in table 1 shows some of the demographics of my participants, of the participant samples, in which most of them were ages 65 and older, weights having some college level or beyond or higher, and living in urban counties and having an income of more than 50,000. For the results, the odd ratio shows 42% higher for adults reporting difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions after being exposed to drugs at home compared to adults not reporting that they had being exposed to drugs at home growing up. This is really important going forward because it opens a new door for evaluating more for the cognitive aspect of that for childhood experience that can have an impact on the child development, and also re-emphasize the importance of providing a child with healthy environment growing up. Thank you.
All right, so I'm back with a different form of violence and a different technology platform. So if you are a teen or college student, or you have one in your life, you've probably heard about TikTok. For everyone else, TikTok is a video sharing social network service that allows users to create and share a really wide variety of content in 60 seconds or less. It's quite a bit like Twitter, but for videos. And it is wildly popular among young people. There have been almost 2 billion downloads in the 4 years since it launched. So Dr. DiMaria, my partner in this work, and I learned about it from our undergraduate students who are avid users. And as so often sparks our new research collaborations, we said to ourselves, okay, how can we make this relevant to sexual health and violence? So fast forward a few months, and the 120 Under 40 Ingenuity Fund, which is sponsored by Bayer and the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute for Population and Reproductive Health, supported our work determining how young people talk about sexual health on TikTok. With a true fleet of undergraduate assistants, we abstracted almost 1,000 TikToks over the course of 16 weeks. Twice a week, our students would go on TikTok and identify the 6 most popular videos in designated hashtags. I'll be focusing on the sexual violence hashtags, which include No Means No, Me Too, Sexual Assault, and Survivor. Altogether, videos tagged in these hashtags have been viewed nearly 4 billion times. So once we had all the data, we used conventional qualitative content analysis to determine what was being shared, which leads me into the exciting bit, the results. We had a total of 34 videos in our sexual violence related hashtags, which is less than 1. Unlike many social media platforms, hashtags were somewhat irrelevant to the ways that people navigate TikTok. We expected to see many different top videos come and go as people use the hashtags to find relevant content. However, what we learned is that the For You page, which is where TikTok presents curated list of videos, is the way that most people choose which videos they're going to watch. As a result, our top videos in each hashtag were quite stable over time. But regardless of how people ended up watching these videos, they had been viewed many, many millions of times. And what we learned is that sexual violence related videos in our study were created predominantly by young women. Most of them were sharing their stories. Some were sharing stories of childhood sexual abuse, others were talking about date rape or sexual assault by strangers. A few were talking about sexual harassment, like being aggressively catcalled on the street. So although the creators and the type of content were really quite similar, there were so many different, very creative ways that people shared their stories. Some young people reenacted their trauma. They did this by sharing a series of short clips that represented their experiences at different points in the violence. Like one woman who we see interact with her unseen stepfather. She represented her stepfather by text on the screen. And so when she was young, he would wake her up to watch movies late at night. Then we cut forward to her crying while being instructed to keep everything a secret. So when combined with the hashtags and the caption, it was clear that her stepfather was sexually abusing her. Others would put paint on their hands, and then they demonstrated where and how the perpetrator touched them. At the end of the video, we see the numerous handprints and paint over their mouths, breast, arms, and pubic areas. Other people shared more general information, almost like a PSA, although quite a bit more fun. And they often focused on consent. There was one man who shared the video and the message, no means no, but so does, I don't feel like it. I'm not sure. I just don't feel comfortable with this. Not right now. Can we just hang out? And I don't like that. Often these PSA-esque videos use humor to share their message, like one woman who rated the excuse given by a man who raped her. She gave, you only said no once, a 0 out of 10. So we didn't crack the secret code for how to make TikToks go viral, but we did learn that many young people use TikTok to share about sexual violence, which suggests that it may be one way to reach young people with prevention and recovery messages. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Feng Hongdong, first year postdoc fellow in Penn Nursing. I'm so honored to present my study here. The topic is the association between ACEs exposure, physical activity, and depression in a national sample of US adolescents. Depression affects approximately 5% of the individuals under the age of 17 in the US. Adverse childhood experience are one of the risk factors that consistently link to the individual's depression. Evidence shows that physical activity intervention contributes to the improvement of the burden of mental illnesses. So it is possible that physical activity may help nurture the adolescent's resilience and mitigate the consequence of ACEs. However, the association between ACEs exposure, physical activities, and depression remains unclear in adolescent population. This study applied the ecological framework to better understand the association between ACEs subgroup, physical activity, and depression by considering individual level, social level, and societal level factors as covariates. Data were from the 2016 and 2017 National Survey of Children's Health Service. A secondary analysis was conducted on 29,617 adolescents aged 12 to 17 years old. One question on any depression diagnosis or not, 9 items of ACEs, and one question on weekly physical activities were used. Depressive analysis found more than 1/3 of the adolescents experience at least one type of ACEs in their lifetime. Latent class analysis identified 4 latent classes of ACEs in adolescents. Nearly 70% with or low level of ACEs, naming as low AFEs, 20% with high economic hardship and parental separation co-occurred, naming as moderate household dysfunction, 8% with high economic hardship, parent separation, household mental illness, and substance use co-occurred, naming as severe household dysfunction, and 4% with all high levels on non-ACEs categories, naming as high AFEs. Then the logistic regression took adolescents with low AFEs as reference, found that controlling different levels of covariates, the odds of having the depression diagnosis was 1.95 times greater for adolescents with moderate household dysfunction, 2.29 times greater for adolescents with severe household dysfunction, and 3.4 times greater for adolescents with high AFEs. Taking no physical activities as reference, physical activity for 1 to 3 days per week remained a significant substantial protector of childhood depression. These findings highlight the importance of using physical activity intervention as preventive approach to address depression of adolescents with ACEs. The finding also highlight understanding ACEs and intervention should be based on considering latent class of ACEs. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm going to share a poster of my own. And this is a study I did in the summer of 2018, focusing on school disengaged youth. So what we know is that school disengaged youth youth that are disengaged during middle school are at increased risk for continued school disengagement kind of throughout the kind of high school years as well. They leave secondary school prior to graduation, and they're more likely to be engaged in risk behaviors, including alcohol and drug use. Theory and previous research suggests that empowerment-based interventions and future orientation may be key mechanisms to target for preventing school dropout and alcohol and drug misuse. So the purpose of this study was to test the efficacy of youth empowerment solutions for positive futures on school engagement, pro-social behaviors, and substance use attitudes. And I'm going to share the results today of the 6-month post-intervention. So Youth Empowerment Solutions for Positive Futures is a summer enrichment program. It's grounded in empowerment theory and research, much of what I have done in future orientation. So we use strategies that are meant to kind of empower youth and to increase what we think of as empowerment, and to increase their kind of future thinking, to reduce alcohol and drug use and school dropout, or to kind of try to engage them in school in a more positive way. We recruit young people who have early warning signs for school disengagement in middle school, so in 6th and 7th grade. So students were recruited based on school personnel identifying whether they were frequently absent, so kind of chronic absenteeism, whether they had behavioral issues in school, and based on their prior academic performance. So whether they had failing grades, were behind for grade, for age, and some of those kind of factors. Young people attend the intervention 4 days a week, 4 hours a day for 5 weeks. And then the program includes 5 units: youth as leaders, learning about our school community, building partnerships and planning for change, action, which is a student-led school change project that the students, as part of this, select, and then they get permission from school administration to complete their project, and they complete the project as part of the program. And then the last unit is kind of at the final end, is reflection and celebration. So in 2018, I worked with 2 school districts. I had enrolled 67 students in 6th and 7th grade. 55 students came the first day and completed the baseline survey, and then 52% in the end were followed at 6 months post-intervention. So what we found was that you can see in the table on the far, I guess it's right, if you're looking at the screen, we saw significantly kind of improvement or change in leadership efficacy, their emotional engagement in school, and pro-social behaviors at 6 months follow-up. And then we saw kind of a p-value of 0.08, so almost kind of significant changes in their expectancies about alcohol and drug use. And what that question asks is how likely they think they'll use alcohol and drugs in the next year, I believe is the question. So even though so that is a positive change in it, the difference in the mean there in the direction we would want. So the preliminary findings support the effectiveness of youth empowerment solutions for positive futures to enhance school engagement and pro-social skills. But of course, we need additional research to determine kind of further efficacy and effectiveness. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm switching hats back. So thank you for the wonderful sessions, for all the posters. We can now take time for questions. If anyone has questions, you can put those in the Q&A box. And then the presenters are also welcome to turn your cameras back on. Okay, so sorry, I'm using double screens, so I'm going to look away from the camera to see what we have for questions to begin with. Okay, well, I'll just start with a few. We had a few pre-submitted questions or questions we got earlier. Dr. Dong, maybe we'll start with the first question for you. So can you talk a little bit about what the advantages of using a latent class analysis to identify the subgroups of ACEs?
Thank you so much for asking question. And latent class analysis accounts the co-occurrence of ACEs using classification strategy, and also avoid both to simplify when using dichotomous ACEs, and also to avoid the one-fits-all dilemma when using the summing scores of ACEs. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just checking. Dr. Jesser, Maybe can you talk a little bit about and tell us a little bit more about the brief child abuse potential inventory and kind of what it's measuring?
Yes. So it's a measure, it's a self-report measure, and it doesn't ask direct questions about child maltreatment, but it asks things that have been shown to be risk factors, for instance, rigidity and like low mood things, and problems with the child or problems in the parent themselves. So it's not directly because it'd be too easy for people to not want to answer questions that would be more direct. So it's less direct than that.
And how does it, what is its relationship then to depression?
It is pretty highly related to depression. The correlations are around 0.5 and 0.6 at the different time points.
Great, thank you. Dr. Arube, am I doing okay? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask one for you. So why was the focus on difficulty concentrating, remembering, and making decisions? Why did you choose that focus for your?
Yes. Yeah, so most research has been focused on in terms of like mental and child physical impact on with the adverse childhood experience, but less focus has been on the cognition impact that adverse childhood experience can cause. So that's why I want to open the door to new perspective that we can look at in terms of the cognitive impact that adverse childhood experience can cause.
Great. I'm checking to make sure we don't, and if anyone does have a question, we can sure take additional questions. So I'll take one now that just came in through the chat. So it's for Miriam. That's okay to use her first name. That's what I'm seeing right here. So can you tell us a little more about the training for the e-coaches? What was covered in the training and how long was the training?
Yeah, definitely. So we were trained by master's and doctorate level therapists, specifically in motivational interviewing. So we were doing motivational interviewing on the groups. And prior to actually doing motivational interviewing on the Facebook groups, we attended Dr. Ambonar's 2-day motivational interviewing training. We also had supervision with the master's level therapists that are in the study, where we went over hypothetical, responses, how we would respond, how we'd respond to them with different types of reflections, affirmations, just going over the principles of MI. And then we also practiced amongst one another. And then when it got time to actually start on the group, we still had supervision once a week with the master level therapists and doctorate level therapists, where they would go over our responses with us, check them, and we would come up with responses together until we were trained enough to do it on our own.
Great, thank you. While I have you, why don't can you talk a little bit about more, what was the ratio of alcohol and other drug kind of content related to kind of other forms of content, or kind of what was the balance of the content kind of posted by the coaches or the e-coaches?
Yeah, definitely. So we're still, getting the exact numbers with that ratio, but because we're in the process of all of that, but roughly 20% of our content the first week out of 42 total pieces of content. Each week out of the 8 weeks has 42 pieces of content. So that first week, it was roughly 20% was alcohol related. And it continually progressed so that by the time we got to the 8th week of the intervention, 50% of those 42 posts were alcohol related. Additionally, in terms of marijuana use, that started off with 5% the first week and worked its way up to 15% by the 8th week. And we did that gradual build up so we could establish rapport with the participants, build trust, so that when we did bring up these more sensitive topics later, they felt more comfortable to discuss them with us.
Great, thank you. Oh, here's one for Dr. Reese. What will be the next step for the research since you have discovered that hashtags aren't significant in how people would view videos on TikTok?
Sure. So we were surprised and a little bit sad that we couldn't find quite as many videos as we had hoped to find through our sampling framework. But the videos that we found, both related to sexual violence and also the broader sexual health content, did have some really good messages and helped us understand why or what people were sharing, helped to understand a little bit why they were sharing. So our goal is to create a training manual, is probably a little bit too strong of a word, but a help guide for people who want to reach young people with these messages, whether it's sexual health or sexual violence. Because we also, and I didn't talk about this, we also looked at influencers who were very popular. There are a lot of OBGYNs who share and have many, many followers. I mean, it's amazing how much content they produce and how many people see it. So we also looked at what made their videos popular. And so we're trying to identify what are those commonalities, what is common between the videos that are popular through however TikTok gets it to people and the influencers, and help practitioners and others who are interested in reaching young people identify little tweaks that they can make to try to make their videos more popular.
Great, thank you. Dr. Elrube, what do you think can be done to bring more attention to kind of issues around ACEs and some of the work you've done?
Yeah, so one thing that I was thinking about when I was doing my research is the school intervention program and how we can bring that focus to especially the school-specific intervention programs that targets kids from the early on. Like if we can target kids who are having difficulty concentrating at school, having difficulty remembering, maybe we can have more intervention program on them and seeing is there like another aspect that is causing that or not. If there is, we can probably work on that from the beginning to avoid any problem later on in development. So yeah, with that, I would highly suggest and hope that more attention can be done to looking at the cognitive aspect and amongst school intervention programs.
And our panelists are also welcome to ask each other questions too, if you think of any.
I actually had a question for Dr. Elrube as well, which was, it seems like you focused on one adverse childhood experience rather than using the whole, sum of adverse experiences. And I wonder why you picked that. And if you looked at the total, we kind of, I think in general, see it as a better measure, or, it's like such a good measure. So I just wondered why you did it that way and what you thought about it. Thank you.
Yeah, so I wanted to have more near focus on cognitive because other aspects looked at physical, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, that things that were done already. Maybe future research can look at combination of all of them. There in my paper, I will go ahead and do adjustments for other things. But for my particular research, I want to focus on one cognitive aspect and bring attention to it. That's why. But it would be a good idea to have like other aspect of it.
I'm wondering, so, yours was on ACEs, so was our first presenters. I'm wondering, David or Tanya, do you have anything kind of you would want to add from, what you found in kind of the work that you did on ACEs so far?
Absolutely. A couple of the things, and Tanya mentioned several of the findings that we thought. There were a couple of other areas that we didn't put in the poster, but could potentially have contributed to a difference in outcomes and knowledge attainment. One of them was that we used content experts in the 2018 year to guide each topic. These were specifically physicians and teachers, and the 2019 group didn't use that resource. In addition to the site visits, and Tanya mentioned this, we were really invested in building rapport with the students beforehand, and that can be done virtually in the future. Future iterations of this event or ongoing programming with the after school program will likely be virtual, but still building rapport is important, and doing site visits can also mean doing that as well. And then the last one, the student leadership. Just touching on how important it is to build autonomy and investment anytime that you're doing some type of educational programming or teaching, to have the students who are meant to learn engaged. Teaching through learning is an incredibly useful tool and pedagogical practice that's proven through research. And so getting participants to teach and do as part of their learning is essential to them gaining that knowledge and being able to retain it over the long term.
I have a question for Dr. Risi. So you specified on TikTok. Do you think that same study can be replicated on Instagram or other social media platform? And why did you just focus on TikTok, since like Instagram is actually popular too?
So yes, I think it can be duplicated on other platforms. And we actually have done similar work on other platforms. We chose TikTok because our students were so excited about it. It's in the realm of social media, it's still fairly new, and it's the cool kid on the block right now, which I think saying that means that I am directly not cool. But our students love TikTok, and we were hearing from students who were interested in working with us that they were also getting a lot of information about things like sexual health. Some of them lived in states that didn't have very rigorous sexual health education in schools, and so they were sharing like, oh, we hear about this on TikTok, and we're like, okay, we need to understand, like, if you're getting your sexual health information and education from TikTok, like, we've got to figure out what's going on. And in the sexual violence world, it was a lot of messages about stories and individual perspectives. In the rest of the sexual health realm, there were some really wrong information, like just flat out incorrect information that was being shared. And so that also drove a little bit why we picked TikTok, because we heard from so many of our students that they were learning really important things there. And they probably are also getting some of that information on Facebook. Well, probably not Facebook, but Instagram or other places. But they talked about TikTok over and over. It was a really fun project because we got to expand the scope as more students became interested. We expected that we would have 3 or 4 students, and so we posted an ad asking for student interest, and we ended up with almost 15. And so I think that speaks a little bit to how much TikTok resonates with young people right now.
We had another question come in for you. Would your results on hashtags be applied to all genres in TikTok?
Yes, which is so, this I think is actually, from my perspective, one of the most interesting results of this study, because we're seeing that in many other aspects of social media, in Reddit, in Instagram, you're more intentionally navigating. There is some information that's presented to you through your feed, but for the most part, it's people that you've chosen to follow or very specifically relevant to things that you're interested in. And TikTok, it is really driven by what TikTok wants to show you. And that I think can be good, it can be bad. One thing that we saw was in the middle of September, TikTok changed its policies around COVID. And so prior to September, I want to say it was around September 18th, we saw a lot of funny and individual people sharing COVID information. Starting in the middle of September, TikTok did a 180 and they started really pushing the evidence-based information. So it was coming from the WHO, it was coming from the CDC. And until that switch, those videos were never in our top videos. I mean, it was people laughing about being stuck at home, or there was one that our students particularly enjoyed that was a cat yelling at people, right, at people who were outside when they should have been at home. It was in seeing that shift that we really realized that what TikTok wants to show you is what you're seeing. And whether it's cat videos that are funny or good information from people who are reputable and should be sharing that health information, they're really driving the bus in that one.
Could I ask a question for Dr. Jester? Since infant mental health is a seemingly emerging field, especially in the world of social work, how do you envision the implementation and broadening of infant mental health resources in order to do this prevention of ACEs, either across the state or nationwide?
So yeah, I think, wait, can you say it again? Just the middle part.
Sure, no, absolutely. Infant mental health, I know through colleagues in social work, it's a somewhat emerging field with more interest and expansion. How do you envision increasing resources across the board? Is this something that statewide public health need to implement, or is this something that health centers can take over?
Well, we would like to see, I think some of the stuff some of the programs we're developing, well, first of all, the infant mental health home visiting that I was talking about today, it is Medicaid funded, so it is available for high-risk families. Some other things we're doing, we're hoping that, in the long run, like insurance would pick up. For instance, we're doing an intervention called Mom Power, which is a group-based intervention also for high-risk infants. And it's shorter, it's only like 12 weeks long, and it's group-based. Yeah, so we're hoping, insurance could pick up that because it's actually, it's an effective treatment. And of course, we'd also like to see more, federal funding for research, of course, But yeah, I think overall, we actually know that putting money into really early childhood is effective. So it just seems like it's a political question, it's like it's the political will to do these things that we actually know are effective and cost effective over a period of time. And, I know Bernie Sanders was talking about it, but not too many politicians are. So it's yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I think I'm going to wrap this up. We've come to the end of the time for our session. So thank you for joining us at the inaugural Injury Prevention Center Research Symposium. Thank you to our presenters, and thank you, Lynn and Kanisha, for the Injury Prevention Research Center team for making sure this session went smoothly. As a reminder, all sessions today were recorded and will be available on our website in the coming weeks. You will receive a feedback survey within the next week. We encourage you all to fill it out to help us continue to grow and improve this event in the future years. If you are not already a member of the Injury Prevention Center, please go to our website at injurycenter.umich.edu to become one and to get access to our monthly newsletter with publication, updates, and events. We also want to encourage you to attend our Suicide Prevention Summit, which will be held virtually on March 16th. You can RSVP for this event under the events tab on our website. We are also accepting abstract submissions for this event. Please check out our website for more information and opportunities that might interest you or your colleagues, such as our summer internship program or our massive open online courses. Thank you again for your attendance, and thank you to all of our presenters for sharing their important work in injury prevention. I hope you have a great rest of the day.